Prime Minister, thank you for your time. We've been filming with students who are undertaking the defence training that is now compulsory. Why is it important to have made that a compulsory thing here in Estonia?
It is important for many reasons. I mean, they learn a lot in these courses, the basic, emergency aid, all these things, all these skills that you need actually in any type of crisis. And people, young people actually really like those courses as well.
And obviously that sort of leads up to sort of conscription, which you have here in Estonia for men. There has been talk about conscription being needed in other NATO countries. Is it something you would recommend as NATO prepares for the future?
I highly recommend it. I highly recommend it. All the men will get training. So if there is something happening, then they know what to do. You learn a lot. You also develop physically there in the conscription. But I think it's more like the skills that they acquire there in terms of crisis management.
And one person we spoke to at the camp was saying it's only a matter of time for Estonia, a small nation, to have conscription for women as well. Is that something that would
we
need
haven't
to happen?
We haven't really discussed that. That has been asked a lot, but women can do it voluntarily, and we have when young people graduate from high school, they can go together with the whole class to conscription. Why is it beneficial? It is because then you can go together with your whole class, and you will be in the same place with your friends. And then also a lot of young ladies take this up voluntarily.
And, speaking to some of the students, they feel safe being in Estonia, but some of them are worried about Russia and the possible future. You are the Prime Minister first and foremost, but you are also a parent. I wonder what it's like when you have those discussions with your children about the future, about what might happen, especially when you look at Ukraine and young men are dying every day. That must really hit home.
It should hit home everywhere. I mean, we are in NATO and we don't have first or second class NATO countries. We only have NATO countries. If we are not able to help Ukraine militarily enough, then, Russia might move further. And they only take their steps if they think that we are weak enough. Weakness is provoking the aggressor, not the strength. That's why we have to invest in defense. That's why we have to train. We have to do all this, that it would deter the aggressor from taking another step. And the strength of NATO comes from the strength of armies in NATO, all the allies. That's why we have the defense investment pledge of 2% of GDP. Estonia is investing more than 3%, 3.2% of GDP to defense, but not all the allies are doing this. So Russia is a clear threat. We can see this in Ukraine, and in order to, the war really, to stop there, we have to do more ourselves.
Are your children worried about the future? Because this is about the next generation.
It is about the next generation, and it depends on our actions now. I mean, if we are weak, then, the future might be very, very grim. If we are strong, if we are investing to defense, if we are, developing NATO further, NATO is a defense alliance, and also work on the accountability issues for Russia, because like the historian Timothy Snyder said, that in order for a country to become better, it must lose its last colonial war. And Russia has never lost its last colonial war. It is up to us to make sure that they will lose in Ukraine, so that all the others don't have to worry.
But Russia at the moment has obviously begun a renewed advance in Ukraine, and Ukraine's defences are being stretched, they're losing ground. That must be frustrating for you, who's always talked about giving more aid to Ukraine. It's been delayed, and they are where they are. Is that a fault of the alliance?
I mean, the price goes up with every hesitation, with every delay, if we don't help them enough. But I understand also that, we are all different countries with different historical backgrounds, also different neighbors. Some have much better neighbors than we do. But, and that's why they come from this. We are all democracies. That is also the public opinion. Of course, Plato said that it's also the role of the governors to teach the people or educate the people what is it all about. But I mean, we have seen some delays in the military aid reaching. We saw a delay with the American decision to support Ukraine. But I think we should, avoid the trap of being overly pessimistic this year. I think last year we were maybe overly optimistic regarding the counter-offensive, and the expectations were really high, but big disappointments come from big expectations. This year, I think, Russia hasn't been able to use this opportunity window where the, military aid did not reach Ukraine, and they haven't made big advances. So let's see this as a positive thing.
But do you think this is a really important tipping point, that Ukraine could lose the war because there's talk of a summer offensive from the Russians, a winter offensive? This is a worrying time.
It depends on our military aid. It is clear that, it is a war going on where only Ukrainians are fighting. The only thing that is asked from us is the reallocation of resources so that they can defend their country. I was last week in a panel with a historian who compared this situation to 1938. If the Czechoslovakian Czech government would have the arms to fight the Germans, then there would never be the Second World War. But they didn't have that, so it went further. So his point was that it's up to us to make sure that 1939 does not repeat itself.
And how do you do that, though? Because it must be getting frustration that every time Ukraine asks for something, lots of allies are hesitating. What conversations do you have with, other hesitant leaders to convince them?
I mean, we try to convince them several ways. I mean, history does not repeat itself, but rhymes. And let's make sure that it doesn't rhyme at this 38. I mean, it is cheaper for us to support Ukraine now so that the war doesn't continue anywhere else, which means that we don't have to send our soldiers to fight. I think this is the fear that everybody has. The other point that is very often risen is the fear of nuclear threat. But the point is that, Russia has threatened by nuclear arms. If that works so that you restrain yourself from helping Ukraine, then we're going to see nuclear proliferation, because those countries who have an appetite for their neighbors' territories, more aggressive countries, dictatorships, they see that this works. That means that I have to have a nuclear weapon. And those countries who are afraid of their neighbors, if I would have a nuclear weapon, it would deter them from attacking me. So if we are really afraid of nuclear threat, then we shouldn't give into the nuclear threats, demands using the nuclear threat, really.
Because President Zelensky has said that NATO planes should shoot down Russian missiles in Ukrainian airspace. Do you agree?
It is up to, of course, NATO countries who have these type of equipment to decide how to do this. And of course, there would be so much more that we can do, but it is a democratic alliance, and we have to, keep everybody's ideas in mind.
Because I guess the problem is that, as you say, if more is not done, Ukraine gets pushed further and further. In a worst-case scenario, Ukraine is low on morale, low on trained soldiers, Russia's advancing, it's losing. Is there a point where, in order for Ukraine not to lose, you are going to have to send NATO troops to train Ukrainians in Ukraine, or even send NATO troops to fight?
I think, it is very difficult always to explain. I mean, if we would see to the future, I mean 5 years from now, then we would know what was the right decision at this moment. Like we know in history, okay, if they would have done that, it would have been different. But we don't know that. We don't see to the future.
But if it is 1938?
Yeah, no, true. But different leaders see it differently. There are also leaders who see this as the situation before the First World War, and they think that we shouldn't do anything to provoke the First World War. So this is that we see things differently. So my point is that if we would see to the future and see that really providing Ukraine the means to push Russia back so that they also pay a price for this, and by this I mean that they also have the casualties on their side, not only that they advance and gain territories, they lose people on the way, but the Russians don't really count them because it's a dictatorship. But if they would have also, if they would pay a price on their side, the thinking would be different. But not all leaders see it in the similar way, and that's why we have to, explain them or try to bring them on board. And if you look back, then you have seen that, there have been very many times where some leaders said that, this is not what we're going to do, and then we do this. Of course, the frustration comes from that, maybe we should have done this already earlier, but we get there eventually.
So you wouldn't rule out, as you said before, sending Estonian troops to train Ukrainian soldiers in Ukraine?
I wouldn't rule out anything at this moment. Because,
including sending troops to fight?
Including all the steps. Because if we are ruling out anything, then we are only giving signals to Russia. Okay, they are not going to do that. Fine. So I think we have to think not only what Russians want, but also what they are afraid of, to play on those cards. And that's why we should have some strategic ambiguity around what we are going to do next. I think this is important.
It also seems that, especially in Estonia, speaking to people here and speaking to you, you're not afraid of taking those steps that might antagonize Russia. Whereas it seems other allies are worried about prodding that bear.
Russia has shown that they don't need any excuse to attack another country. If the argument is that we shouldn't do that because that provokes Russia, no, the aggressor is only provoked by weakness, not strength. But the historical background is different. The understanding is different. We have seen in the near history that giving in to the dictator hasn't really helped. If you think about Minsk agreement, if you think about Georgia, if you think about steps like this, their appetite only grew. And what we should learn from the Second World War is that when aggression pays off somewhere, it serves as an invitation to use it elsewhere. We're going to see more. And we already see these tensions building up. We already know countries who have appetite for the neighbors' territories. So they are carefully watching now how the global audience really reacts to this very black and white case where there was a sovereign country and it was attacked militarily.
And because the Director General of Estonia's Foreign Intelligence Service said that Russia is calculating that a military conflict with NATO is possible in a decade, do you agree with that? Is that what you have to prepare for?
This is a paradox. If we do enough for our own defense, and I mean NATO's countries, if we invest more than 2% of our GDP to defense, if we procure the necessary equipment, if we do the trainings together and everything, so Russia sees that we are strong enough and they are not attacking us. If we are not doing this, then probably Russia might test NATO. And again, I want to stress that it's not us as Estonia or Baltic Baltic countries, it's NATO, because we don't have any first or second class NATO countries, we only have NATO countries.
But I guess the frustration, though, is that you keep on telling them this, spend more on defence. You would presumably be the next country right there on the front line.
Well, I wouldn't say so, because if you look at the geography, if you look at Russia's other neighbors, then you have many who are not in NATO. So I would guess that they would take a bite that it's not really attacking NATO. Because how I explain NATO to school children is very simple. It is like when you have a school bully in your school and you are physically weaker, then he doesn't bully you when you have big friends. And this is the way NATO works. When, we are attacked, attack on one is attack on all. That means that Russia goes into war with the United States, with UK, with France, Germany, and so far they haven't wished for that. So again, what I want to stress is it's up to us as NATO countries to do more so that they don't think that NATO is weak enough so that they can, really advance.
And you've also spoken recently about the sort of shadow war Russia is doing here in Estonia, sabotage, electronic warfare. We've also seen, Estonia's border guards say that Russia's removed buoys on the Narva River. What do you think is going on here in terms of, is this Russia?
Again, what I want to stress, I haven't said shadow war against Estonia. I've said shadow war against our democratic societies. And there I mean all the European countries. What we see is different hybrid events in different countries. I think it would be a mistake from our side to treat them all separately. What Russia wants is to sow fear within our societies, by creating chaos, by also undermining our democracies. We have elections coming. So what do you really believe? I mean, a lot of misinformation. So the people tend to, doubt everything. And then, forces that don't see the democratic way forward will flourish.
And when you talk about elections, obviously there's the American presidential election. You're asked this all the time about what happens with President Trump. Do you think, given the things he said about NATO, that he would deploy forces to Estonia if there was an invasion?
Well, I've spoken to people who are closer to Trump, and I don't think that anybody really knows what his plans are. But I think
that must be scary.
Yeah, but the message again for the European allies is that let's not worry about some election result or hope for some election result. Let's focus on what we can do for our own defense. And that again means that everybody has to really start investing more to defense, but also the defense industry to boost their production.
So preparing also for the NATO alliance to be less reliant on America?
Well, being more reliant on Europe, I think it is something that we have to work with. That is true, but United States is a democratic country, and we don't get to elect their leaders. So we have to work with every leader that they choose for themselves. And I hope and I still think that they are not leaving NATO. And why? Because even presidential candidate Trump is very much interested in economy. And if you see that, American companies are earning 2.7 times more profit from Europe than they are earning from Asia. So there is a clear interest. So if something happens in Europe, that also affects the jobs and prosperity of the United States.
And the next NATO summit takes place in July, and it actually happens just days after our general election. Do you have a message for our next Prime Minister, whether it's Rishi Sunak or Sir Keir Starmer?
Well, UK has been a great supporter of us, and UK is the framework country in Estonia. So we are very, very grateful for all your troops being present here and the cooperation we have had. With different prime ministers as well. So, of course, elections are a very turbulent time, and I hope that UK continues also to see the world, and especially what is happening in Ukraine, a similar way. I've had contacts with both the leading candidates, and we are totally aligned.
When it comes to the NATO summit in Washington, 75 years of the alliance, what do you want to get out of that summit? What does Estonia need? What does the alliance need? What does Ukraine need?
We have different goals, of course. I mean, one is that 2 years ago we got the, we moved from the deterrence posture to defense posture. What it means is that, NATO is able to defend our country also from the first moment, from the first centimeter. These are the military plans that are in place. What is needed is to implement all those plans, which means that pre-positioned equipment to the more vulnerable places, air defense, all this would be in place. For Ukraine, it is important that we show the pathway, how eventually they will become also NATO members. It's not going to happen this year. It's not going to be invitation this year, but clearly that we are moving to more intense cooperation. Then I would like to see also the defense investment pledge. Again, I mean, increased. I don't think it's going to happen now because only 18 countries do the 2% of the GDP, but actually we are in this moment where we should all do more. And I explain you, I bring you this example. In 1988, it was a Cold War. All the NATO's allies were investing more than 2% of their GDP to defense, some even 6%, because the threat was real. That was Cold War. But now it's a hot war going on in Europe, and still not everybody is doing this.
Because on that, you talk about, Estonia as part of the whole alliance together and needing the other countries to have defense and, shore up their own armies. But one thing I was struck with when we were talking to some of the Estonian Defence League was that, one of them said, we have to stand alone if it's necessary. This idea that if that awful day came, Estonia may be, they would be the front line. They don't know what would happen with NATO. Like, have you got any reassurance for those people? Because it feels like, that is part of what they feel.
Well, I think it is good that we prepare ourselves, because before Article 5 there is also Article 3, and Article 3 says that everybody has to do their utmost to protect themselves. So this is totally in line. I mean, what I am telling them is that the new NATO's plans are in place so that the help will reach us soon. And plus, we have now the United States soldiers here, we have the UK soldiers, we have the French soldiers. So I mean, and moving people nowadays is a matter of hours. So that is not that problematic. More problematic is the pre-positioned equipment, and we see more of that coming.
Prime Minister, thank you very much for your time.
Thank you.